The glass tower I built my life in, 34 floors above the noise of Midtown Manhattan, used to feel like a fortress, a symbol of everything Veronica and I achieved. Now, standing here watching the taxi lights streak across the wet asphalt, it feels like a mausoleum for a future that never existed. I was Elias Thorne, a senior partner in one of the city's most prestigious architecture firms, a man who prided himself on seeing the flaws in any structure. But when it came to the architecture of my own marriage, I was criminally blind. An idiot who defended a termite infestation while the foundation crumbled around my ears. That is the grinding, suffocating truth of it. I defended Veronica against my family, against my partners, against every single person who ever had the slightest reservation about her dazzling charm and her rapid ascent. I believed she was misunderstood, a shining star too bright for the cynics. She was just good at lying. If you are watching this, you know that sickening drop in your stomach. That moment when the air leaves the room and the noise of the world goes silent, and you realize the person you swore your life to is a stranger, a cruel and efficient enemy. I know you want to see the fire, the fallout, the brutal, surgical way I dismantled the life she built on my sacrifice. Believe me, I delivered. This is not some gentle story of moving on. This is the blueprint for destruction, the methodical collapse of a lie. If you have been through this kind of profound betrayal, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Because this story isn't about recovery, it's about retribution, cold and completely justified. Stick around, because you are going to want to see the look on her face when the lights went out for good. The first hints were subtle, kind of things you rationalize away because admitting the truth would mean shattering your world. Veronica, with her booming Tribeca gallery. The Nexus had always been busy, but the last 6 months had shifted from demanding to impossible. She was frequently absent, citing meetings with international collectors, late-night installations, or crucial funding dinners. She stopped coming to the East End house on weekends, preferring to stay in the city apartment because she claimed the drive was too much after an 18-hour day of dealing with temperamental artists and even more temperamental money managers. I bought her excuses, not because they were good, but because I needed them to be. I was buried in the design phase for the new Hudson Yards Tower, working 80-hour weeks myself, fueled by coffee, and the assumption that my wife, my partner, was working just as hard for our future. My future, her future, as it turned out, was already being built elsewhere, using tools I provided. The true discovery didn't come from some sophisticated private investigator or a deep dive into bank records. It was simple, mundane, and accidental, made infinitely worse by the context of my loyalty. My older sister Clara had always been wary of Veronica, calling her a social climber wearing a designer mask. 2 years ago, I cut Clara out of my life almost entirely after a massive Thanksgiving confrontation, where Clara publicly accused Veronica of manipulating my finances. I defended Veronica with ferocity, demanding an apology that never came, choosing my wife over my blood. That memory of alienating the only family I had left made the discovery feel like a physical blow to my chest. It was a Tuesday night, late. Veronica was supposedly at an emergency fundraising dinner in Chelsea. I was working on my laptop in the living room, designing a stress test for a complex cantilever system, when her personal iPad, which she usually guarded like Fort Knox, buzzed on the kitchen counter. She must have forgotten to lock it before she rushed out. It wasn't the general email notification that caught my attention. It was the sound of a very specific encrypted messaging app she insisted she used only for highly sensitive art deals involving oligarchs and auction houses. Curiosity, not suspicion, made me stand up. I walked over, my mind still half in blueprints and structural integrity. The screen displayed a single, new message. It wasn't signed with a name, only a crude, almost childish heart emoji. The content, however, was a perfectly formed knife blade driven straight through my life. The message read, "I missed the view from your terrace, darling. Just saw Ilias's new tower render on the news. Pathetic. He's so predictable. Tell me you'll come to Paris with me next month." Ditch the old man and the awful gallery stress. Kisses, the cold, precise language, the casual cruelty directed at me. The reference to my work being pathetic, and the stunning realization that the view from her terrace referred, not to our apartment, but to the penthouse of the rival architect, Marcus Vance, who had spent the last 2 years trying to poach my lead engineer and undermine my contracts, that was the moment. That was the one message that proved I was married to a lie. Marcus Vance, my professional nemesis. He was exactly the kind of arrogant, flashy parasite I would never associate with, and she was sleeping with him, openly mocking me and my career in their private exchanges. I didn't react immediately with shouting or breaking things. My blood pressure spiked so high, I could hear the pulse thumping in my ears. But outwardly, I was calm. I took her iPad back to the office, connected it to a secure server, and began a surgical extraction of every byte of data. I wasn't just looking at the new message. I wanted the history. I wanted the blueprint of the betrayal. What I found wasn't a fling. It was a parallel relationship spanning nearly 3 years, starting just 6 months after I sacrificed my relationship with my sister for her. They met at industry events I skipped because I was working. They had weekend rendezvous in Greenwich and secret trips to London, all paid for by inflated expense reports filed through her gallery's nonprofit arm. She hadn't been working late. She had been entertaining Vance in his luxury apartment on the Upper West Side, using my apartment as her personal pit stop and funding mechanism. The betrayal was total. She didn't just break her vows, she monetized my trust. The gallery, which I had invested millions into, was just a lavish front for her high society networking and clandestine meetings. She used my connections to elevate herself professionally, only to turn around and sleep with the man who wanted to destroy my firm. She didn't just disrespect me. She fundamentally misrepresented the woman I had staked my entire emotional security on. The intensity of my anger was cold, crystalline. It wasn't hot jealousy. It was the rage of a man meticulously betrayed by his most trusted partner. I had defended her against everyone, and she had spent that time sharpening the knife for my back. I spent the next 48 hours in a fog of clarity, operating purely on survival instinct. Elias Thorne, the husband, was dead. Elias Thorne, the strategist, took over. Needed proof that was legally ironclad, financially devastating, and publicly catastrophic. My first move was securing my financial perimeter. I quietly hired a forensic accounting team, not lawyers, initially. Their mandate was simple: trace every dollar she moved through the nexus over the last 3 years. Given the scope of her affair, I suspected she wasn't just using the gallery for cover, but also for personal gain, possibly mixing personal funds with charitable donations. Huge vulnerability for a non-profitageant organization in New York. While they dug, I changed the security protocols on every joint account and transferred my legacy assets into an irrevocable trust structured specifically to shield them from divorce proceedings. I locked down the Midtown apartment, changing the key codes and installing internal cameras, which would prove crucial later. The core of the revenge had to hit 2 targets: Veronica's status and Marcus Vance's career. Vance was known for leveraging his connections to secure major municipal contracts, often through borderline illegal methods. His firm was currently bidding against mine for the largest city revitalization project in decades, the one that would cement my legacy. Started targeting Vance first. Using my firm's extensive network of subcontractors and suppliers, I activated a deep digger I knew, a man who specialized in finding dirt on construction bids. Within a week, we had concrete evidence of illegal influence peddling involving Vance and a specific city councilman. But I didn't release it yet. I saved that bullet. I needed to ensure the timing maximized the blast radius for both of them. Next, Veronica. The forensic report came back with gold. Veronica wasn't just misfiling expenses. She had been systematically laundering kickbacks from certain art buyers, who were actually Vance's shell companies, through the gallery's nonprofit acquisition fund. This wasn't just divorce territory. This was federal fraud. The penalty for this kind of financial deceit in the NYC art world is immediate and permanent exile. She had built her entire identity on being a curator of high culture and ethical standards. That identity needed to burn. The centerpiece of my revenge needed to be public, unforgettable, and directly related to the lie. The Nexus was hosting its annual high-profile charity gala in 3 weeks. It's an event where the elite of New York society, including potential investors for Vance's firm and major donors for Veronica's gallery, would gather. This was where the structure she built would collapse. I pretended everything was normal. I came home. I talked about my workload. I even suggested a dinner date. which she smoothly deflected by claiming she needed to meet a collector flying in from Hong Kong. I watched her. Perfectly crafted lies with a chilling detachment, making mental notes of every inflection, every fake smile. She was a superb actress, which only hardened my resolve. 3 days before the gala, I made my move on Vance. I anonymously tipped off the Manhattan District Attorney's office and 2 investigative reporters. One from the Times and one from the Wall Street Journal about the councilman and Vance's illegal bidding practices, providing just enough verifiable detail to guarantee they would launch full investigations immediately. I timed the leak to land on the morning of the gala, ensuring maximum professional chaos. Vance would spend the evening fighting to save his firm, not celebrating with his mistress. For Veronica, the revenge required a personal, dramatic flair. She had spent a small fortune on a custom gown for the gala, designed by a famous Parisian house. She told me it was a gift from a collector. I knew Vance paid for it. I arranged for a specialized courier service to deliver a large, custom-made framed piece of art to the Nexus the morning of the event, dressed personally to Veronica. The package was heavy, wrapped in thick black cloth, contained specific handling instructions. This must be unveiled by Mrs. Thorne at 8 p.m. sharp during the main address. Veronica, high on the attention and adrenaline of the event, believed this was a massive, expected donation from a silent partner, another rung up the social ladder. She couldn't resist the theater. The night of the gala, I arrived impeccably dressed, acting the part of the devoted, slightly boring corporate husband. The room was buzzing with 300 of New York's most influential people. Vance was notably absent. Having spent the day fielding calls from federal investigators and crisis PR teams, exactly as I planned. I watched Veronica, radiating confidence and grace, giving a passionate speech about the integrity of art and the importance of ethical philanthropy. The hypocrisy was a bitter taste I savored. At exactly 8 p.m., she reached the crescendo of her speech. And now, she announced, beaming at the large, shrouded object on a pedestal near the main stage, we have an unexpected, truly magnificent acquisition. A piece donated by a silent benefactor who understands the true value of the Nexus. She pulled the black velvet sheet away with a dramatic flourish. It wasn't a painting. It was a massive, high-resolution, photographic collage I had commissioned. The central image was a pristine photograph of the single text message, blown up to billboard size. I missed the view from your terrace, darling. Just saw Ilias's new tower render on the news. Pathetic. He's so predictable. Tell me you'll come to Paris with me next month. Ditch the old man and the awful gallery stress. Kisses. Surrounding that core image were dozens of smaller, highly incriminating photos, snapshots of Veronica and Marcus Vance kissing passionately on the patio of Vance's penthouse. Copies of the false expense reports detailing their business trips to London, and a zoomed-in, labeled diagram of the financial flowcharts from the Nexus Acquisition Fund directly into Vance's offshore accounts. The final, damning piece was a small, almost invisible signature at the bottom of the collage. Done in my own distinctive architectural script, Elias Thorne, Architect of Truth. The silence in the massive echo-filled space of the Nexus was absolute. For a full 10 seconds, not a single person moved or breathed. Then the murmuring started, a low, collective roar of scandalized whispers. Veronica's face went through 3 distinct phases: confusion, disbelief, and finally, stark, paralyzing terror. She looked like a marble statue cracking under impossible pressure. She tried to rush forward, perhaps to cover the display. But I had positioned 2 incredibly large, calm security guards whom I had hired specifically for this purpose to stand sentry on either side of the pedestal. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I took the microphone from the podium, placing my hand over hers, which was trembling uncontrollably. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the space. My wife, Veronica, has just unveiled the true art of the Nexus. A piece demonstrating 3 years of sophisticated performance art. Financed naturally by the generous donations of people in this room. I paused, letting the statement sink in. Her eyes pleaded with me, A desperate, silent communication of "Stop this, Elias, please." I spent years defending this woman, this gallery, and the integrity of its mission, I continued. I chose her loyalty over my own family. And she rewarded that faith by using her position, her charm, and her proximity to me to commit systematic, demonstrable fraud with my professional rival, Marcus Vance. The evidence you see before you is only the social manifestation. The financial evidence, documenting the misuse of charitable funds and outright money laundering, is currently sitting on the desks of the federal prosecutor's office. A wave of camera flashes erupted from the back of the room, reporters I had subtly tipped off moments before they came in the door. I walked away from the stage, leaving Veronica paralyzed beneath the gaze of the city's elite, the centerpiece of her own brutal unveiling. She had wanted to be famous. I made sure she was infamous. I walked straight out the front door and got into the black car I had waiting on the curb. As the car pulled away, I looked back once and saw the police arriving, lights flashing, a perfect, tragic end to the glamour show. The aftermath was a clinical operation. The divorce was messy, but swift, guided by the preemptive legal maneuvers and the mountain of evidence that made any attempt by her legal team to claim alimony or shared assets laughably impossible. The fraud charges meant the nexus was immediately seized and shut down pending investigation. Veronica wasn't just divorced, she was professionally decimated. Her social capital, the true currency of her life, was wiped out in one night. Became a cautionary tale, the woman who traded her life for a cheap affair and federal charges. Marcus Vance faced similar ruin. The investigation I triggered resulted in his firm losing the major city contract and facing multiple lawsuits, ending his career in New York and forcing him into obscurity. He was collateral damage, but necessary in the architectural plan of revenge. I never saw Veronica again after that night. Her lawyers communicated her surrender. My life returned to the structured, predictable order I valued, but with a foundational change. I rebuilt the structures of my life slowly, deliberately, focusing on my work and tentatively reconnecting with my sister Clara, who simply hugged me and said, "I told you so," with a sadness that felt more profound than her anger ever did. Standing here now, looking over the cityscape, the tower I designed stands tall, an unyielding monolith against the sky. I learned that day that true strength is not in building defenses for others, but in knowing the absolute integrity of your own foundations. I defended her against everyone, and that was my weakness. When I stopped defending her and started seeing her as a structural flaw that needed demolition, the outcome was guaranteed. I took no joy in the destruction, only the cold, clear satisfaction of balancing the scales. The marriage was a lie, but the revenge was perfectly, ruthlessly real. That, truly, is the end of the story. I am Elias Thorne, and I finally finished the construction project she started. It was spectacular, total annihilation. The structure is sound,